welcome in. It is the final wire for 2023. We have made it. We've done it. We've been here for 17 straight weeks, it feels like.
Do you have like your webcam mic selected? That's what it sounds like.
Rude. Is it really that bad? Okay.
It is a little off.
You can definitely tell the difference. There it is.
There we go.
Nice.
I'll actually talk. Golly. But we'll work on it. We've made it somehow. I don't know. I'm very confused about how we got this far. But we've done it. More injuries, though. No surprise there. Keeps happening.
It's just this week, this season, just you can't give us 1 week of just peace and no injuries, or Devontae Adams putting up one catch, or I know that one hits home to Steve a little bit. So sorry about that.
Wow.
It hits home
Way
to
to
me
kick
too.
me while I'm down. Unbelievable. I will say we had the 4 season-long leagues that I played in this year, and I made the semifinal in all of them. And the only 2 that I didn't make the championship are the 2 where you have to set a kicker. So I know what my weakness is. We've established that.
Need to get rid of the kickers. Someone in our Discord, I forget who it was, but was facing Dicker, and he had 26 points. It's just like, imagine if you lose because a kicker puts up 26 and there's no way to predict.
Exactly.
A kicker has a good game because the offense fails, essentially.
Last week in the Scott Fish Bowl, I got eliminated because I played the wrong kicker. Had I played the kicker on my bench, I would have advanced, but I got eliminated instead.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Mm-hmm. Kickers, man, can't do it.
Yep.
I mean, it's not that hard though. I enjoy.
It's just so unpredictable.
I mean, yes and no. If you're on a good offense, you can usually trust a kicker. I mean,
well, maybe
Sanders,
but Jason Sanders, that game that the Dolphins put up 70 points, had 10. He had 10 points.
Right, because of all the extra points. For a kicker.
It was just but it's not 26 because who knew that the Chargers kicker against the Bills was going to put up 26 points? Okay,
well, same thing. I've been playing Matt Gay. He's been my streamer for over a month now, and this was his worst performance since week 4, putting up 4 points against the Falcons in a game that you would think Indy would put up some points. Meanwhile, on my bench, I had Younghoe Koo because I was like, well, they're not going to put anything up against Indy's defense in a game that Indy has to win to push for the playoffs, and he got a 17. Best week of the season for him. So it is what it is. I just can't figure out the kicker situation.
Yeah.
Too wild for me.
In fantasy football, especially the playoffs, are already so luck based, to a certain extent. There's a lot of luck involved in winning one matchup. And so I feel like just removing the kickers, it helps that a little bit. So
yeah, that's what it was. Since
some people are very passionate.
Since his week 11 bye, Younghoe Koo has scored 19 points going into that game, and he scored 17 this week against the Colts. You can't see that coming.
Yeah.
But he is a good kicker. I mean,
exactly. But their offense is just so terrible. Bad offense going against a good defense. I figured there's no way he gets in field goal range enough to actually matter. Ugh.
Yeah.
It happens. It's
tough.
Yeah, the luck can be brutal, that's for sure. But all right. I guess it's less surprising, but quarterback, I mean, at this point, you're kind of locked in. You know who you're going to be rolling with, and
maybe.
I don't think you lost anybody. Maybe Trevor Lawrence potentially is going to be the one out again. Major injuries before.
I don't think so. We don't know if Stroud's going to be back yet. Patrick Mahomes is a bust.
You already had the deal that he was gone. Mahomes has been struggling since they lost Bieniemy. We keep touching on that. And doesn't have a wide receiver that is just dominant out there like Juju was last year.
That's right.
Rice is trying to get to that point, but he's not quite there. But
yeah, he feels like a number 2 receiver, perfect number 2 receiver at best,
Yeah. So we'll see what the Chiefs end up drafting is what's really going to happen here.
I mean, there's also Purdy potentially. We don't know yet. Probably going to play, but he did have the stinger. Browning was kind of bad, and there's a couple bad matchups. So we'll get into it as we get into these waiver wire guys.
Well, I mean, and you just brought it up. The first guy I'm looking at is of course, not too scared of it, but Jake Browning, 41.2% rostered. Over the past 4 weeks, he is averaging 322 yards a game, 1.5 touchdowns, 1.25 interceptions, or in fantasy terms, 20.68 fantasy points. I mean, granted, this past week was really tough. The Steelers really showed up, as they always do for some reason when it comes to crunch time and beating down the Bengals. They like to try and do that and just tear them apart any way they can. But he played without Chase. Higgins continues to be kind of beat up. And then, I mean, this week he gets the Chiefs, who only allowed Aiden O'Connell to throw for 62 yards in the first quarter and still managed to lose that game. So in a game that I can easily see Browning having to throw against the Chiefs, there should be plenty of opportunity for him to again put up that 300 plus yards. And I mean, if he throws 2 touchdowns, you're really made at that point. Honestly, it should be a good week. At this point, you're really just hoping for 16 plus fantasy points from him to be somewhat consistent for a quarterback. The other one is another one who's just been absolutely on a tear this week, but unfortunately has a tough matchup, and it's Joe Flacco, still widely available, 12.8% rostered. But since he became the starter, he's averaging 326 passing yards, 2.5 touchdowns, 1.75 interceptions, or 19.55 fantasy points. The interception's a little skewed because he had 2 games where he threw 3, which just was insane. But it's just the fact that he's throwing over 300. He's averaging over 300 yards. His first game was his rustiest one where he threw 254 yards. But outside of that, it's 311, 374, 368. I mean, and what? 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns. It's very back and forth, but it's right where you're looking at, especially right now when you just need those points and you don't want to get sunk. Joe Flacco's putting up those numbers. I get it. It's the Jets. Terrifying. They're really good against quarterback.
Yeah.
But it's
it
seems like it's brand new Joe Flacco.
I'll throw this out there too. Since he took over in week 13, the top points per game QBs since week 13 are Lamar Jackson, Geno Smith. He only played 2 games. But Geno Smith, number 2, and then Jake Browning, Matt Stafford, and Joe Flacco.
Yeah.
Number 5. And then you've got Josh Allen, Brock Purdy, Fields, Hurts, Baker Mayfield in the top 10. But Flacco, top 5 since starting, has not had a game worse than 17 points, averaging 21. I mean, you're not going to get that from most of these guys you're playing. Brock Purdy just had a 6.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind Browning. I am a little scared of Flacco. Just I mentioned to someone in the Discord, 3 games this year they've given up 17 or more points, and 17 is kind of what I consider a good game. And even if you expand that to 15, it's only 4 quarterbacks they've given up 15 or more points, and 3 of those 4 really did it because they're rushing. Mahomes had 5 on the ground, 5 points on the ground, or else he had about 10 through the air. Russell Wilson had about 5 points on the ground, or else he had about 13.5 through the air. Jalen Hurts had almost 11 through the ground, and obviously Flacco's not going to do that. So I am scared of that. I feel like there's a low floor here with Flacco, high ceiling, low floor. So it's hard to deny what we're seeing, at this point, but his Jets are they're on a whole nother level, so I don't know. You'd have to
defense are on a whole another level is what Mike's trying to say here, because man, that defense is the only thing that's, I mean, I guess Hall finally looked back to his normal this week, but golly, the rest of that team is just not doing a whole lot for you when it comes to fantasy.
Yeah, it's just amazing that we're talking about Joe Flacco and the fantasy championships at any point in his career. Like, when was he this good for fantasy? He was never this good for fantasy with Baltimore. Like maybe he had a year or two, but I don't know. It was never like this. So pretty crazy. And then Derek Carr is another one I like in terms of the matchup for mostly. Is back-to-back 20-point games. I mentioned this last week, I believe. He had a stretch there. It was like week 6 to 9, 4 or 5 week stretch or so, where he was averaging about 17 points a game. He was a top 12 quarterback. Got hurt. Didn't seem to be right for a few weeks. It was continually getting hurt and coming back from the dead, kind of like Lawrence. Getting hurt and not missing games. And maybe he's healthy now. He has his weapons back in Olave. They're using Taysom Hill less, maybe because of an injury there. And they play the Bucs in week 17, which is a really good matchup. They've given up 17 or more points in 4-point per passing touchdown 10 times this year. So you look at last week between Lawrence and Beathard, they combined for 19 points. So I really like the matchup for Carr. I feel safer of a floor there, Carr versus Flacco, and obviously probably upside goes to Flacco at this point, right? So
yeah, but I agree. My only issue is that Carr has also had those points where he completely just disappears from games.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it could be the fact that Taysom Hill's there and is stealing those touchdowns. But right now it looks like they're kind of using Juwan Johnson like the tight end that he should be. They've gotten away from using Taysom Hill quite as much. And then they have Shaheed back finally healthy after missing a handful of games just due to random injuries. And they also stopped using him as that weird short area target that they were trying to kind of replace Olave and just give him more volume, and that didn't work out. He just needs to play that one role. And so it's definitely interesting to kind of see how Carr really just rubber bands back and forth. It's more unsettling if this is the guy you're looking for when it comes to your fantasy championship, but this is who you're down to. I mean, he does have a slightly higher floor, I guess. It's just, it's terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, there's some tough, like I was looking at it, like obviously the Flacco one scares me a bit. Tua against Baltimore without Waddle terrifies me. That's a guy that people could be, that you have in the finals. You're not going to start like Carr over Goff, but Goff against Dallas, maybe he's not the greatest matchup. I don't know, on the road. So, there's a couple players out there where you could potentially be starting as your main guy. That there's some tough matchups for sure. But it is scary to be. Any of these guys are scary to start. You're hoping for 15, 17 points, right? It's kind of what you're hoping for. Yeah,
I mean, ideal. But as we've kind of seen, every week there's been a different top 12 quarterback that's just kind of sliding in there and making their name known and having a really good week. I mean, it's just another weird little tidbit of how fantasy can be so cruel at times.
Yeah. I mean, even Nick Mullins, I'm just worried about him potentially getting benched or, he's making some ridiculous throws, but he still put up 19 points, 20 points last week. So Vikings, they just produce with their quarterbacks put up 19, 20 points because they have the offense. But again, potentially bench, no Addison, no Hawkinson, a little worrisome there.
I mean, we're not quite sure if Addison's going to be playing, and I doubt he does, but again, that's not 100% now. Hawkinson, that's just brutal for most people, and we'll definitely try and give you a couple fill-ins at the end of the show when we get to the tight end section, but we'll move out of it. We're not going to keep harping on it, but we'll move into running back because another injury popped up again, and Isaiah Pacheco was placed in a concussion protocol, and McKinnon was placed on IR so randomly after whatever happened that week. But after Pacheco left this game, 4 carries, I think it says 6 yards. I thought it was 61 yards, but maybe not. 3 catches for 42 yards. And that's a pretty good week. I mean, the 3 for 42, that already gives you 7 points without him having to do a whole lot. And so in a matchup that the Bengals, who I'm not super scared of their front seven. So on the D line, I'm just not worried about it. And so I'm okay rolling him out there, especially he's likely he should see it all if Pacheco is out, and if not, he's still that backup. And he's widely available, 28.6% rostered. The other guy probably is more scary for me because we're bringing it up again. It's Khalil Herbert, 48.6% rostered. Foreman was inactive this week. They said it was a family emergency or family issue. Personal matters, I think, was the actual deal, but actual phrasing for it. And I'm just assuming it has to do with family because last week he looked good. But when it comes to game script, that's when you can really tell which running back the Lions or the Bears are going to use. It's Roshan whenever they're chasing points or they need to throw, it's going to be Roshan Johnson. If it's a neutral or winning game script, it's Herbert. Like so if Foreman's there, that's who it's going to be either way, it seems like. But this week it's Atlanta, so that should be that neutral winning game script. So should be Herbert. If Foreman is out again for whatever the personal reasons are, I mean, Herbert just had 20 carries, 112 yards, a touchdown, 1 reception for 9 yards, or 19.1 fantasy points. Like he's no slouch for a fill-in for sure. And then finally, this one's more for deeper leagues, clearly, but Kenneth Gainwell, 14.1% rostered, was really clutch for the Eagles this past week. Had some big carries that really, I think, helped them salt away the game. But 6 carries, 41 yards, 3 receptions for 38 yards, 10.9 fantasy points. And now is sharing a lot with Swift. In another game, they get the Cardinals this week, another easy matchup for him, and then the Giants again. So at that point, he could, if you go into week 18, which some people do, he could be a very easily plug and play, as a lot of people are going to start sitting their starters because they've locked in playoffs or their seed or whatever. So if they're not playing for anything, like the Eagles should potentially be close to knowing what they're going to be doing. This matchup is pretty good for both Gainwell, for both weeks for Gainwell. So,
yep, no, definitely. Zamir White, I was really surprised to see Zamir White at only 10%. I guess I get it because it's playoffs, people eliminated, not paying attention anymore. Whatever it is, 10%, way too low. If he's out there, grab him. I've used him the last 2 weeks. I understand he played on Monday, which maybe a lot of people couldn't pick him up to start, but he's one of those guys. We talked about it before the playoffs started. There's always a couple guys who you look at it from weeks 15 to 17 who was really good, and there's random names, and there's Zamir White, RB9 the last 2 weeks. He's been playing well. He's averaging 16 points in PPR. Now, Jacobs, it was kind of weird because I think he had an illness, which maybe is the thing that kept him out. It looked like he was maybe going to get back. Yeah, I think he practiced on on Thursday. Didn't practice Friday and Saturday because of an illness potentially. So he could be back, and that just, obviously you're not starting Zamir White if he is back. But if he's out, again, really, really good start. They're going to run the hell out of the ball. So we saw that last week, the last 2 weeks. So it just needs to be
having
picked up.
Success with it. So, I mean, you might as well at this point, if you're winning games with it and he's being that effective. And honestly, it could also be just that Jacobs doesn't want to play anymore at this point. And they're just like, well, you're sick, right? You're fine. So just sit down and rest.
Yeah, that's definitely something we mentioned was like, what's his incentive? He's not on he's a 1-year contract. So, if he is a little beat up, what's his incentive to go out there and risk a more serious injury? So Chris Rodriguez Jr. is another guy. He basically took over the Brian Robinson role the last couple of weeks, had a good game, scored a couple touchdowns. He got hurt, I believe. So he might not, just monitor that. I mean, Brian Robinson could come back as well, right? He's not like on an IR or anything. So
yeah, he should be able to come back, but he hasn't really had a full practice yet. So again, until that starts happening, you're probably looking at Gibson, who I think is still available enough that you could probably pick him up in most leagues. If Robinson is out and Rodriguez is out.
Yeah, definitely Gibson if he's out there. I'd be grabbing him. But Rodriguez, maybe in a deeper league, And then Justice Hill, we saw in yesterday's game, 62% of the snaps, which is what he does. But he did get 13 touches, 10 carries, 3 catches. So if he can get something similar to that, you could do worse. This could be a shootout. If he gets, again, 3 catches, does his thing, 10 carries, and if one of those turned into a 20-yard run and he gives you, you're looking for 10, hopefully 10, 8 to 10 PPR points or something, maybe gets in the end zone. They're not going to use him at the goal line, obviously, but you could do worse with the other options that are out there. Like, we don't know. Zamir White could do nothing because Jacobs is back. Chris Rodriguez could do nothing. Khalil Herbert could be nothing with Foreman back. Clyde is obviously the number one target, but Justice Hill is like the only one really besides Clyde on this list. And we don't even know Pacheco could come back from the concussion protocol. So Justice Hill is the only one really on this list that we kind of know what he's going to get next week. And it's going to be 10, 12 touches probably. So could do worse.
Yeah. And for sure, that's probably, like you said, the next one that I'd be ranking. But it's scary because Edwards is the one taking the high quality touches near the goal line carries, all that good stuff. They'd score again this week. So it's him and Jackson when it gets to the goal line, and that's tough to beat. But again, we're talking about injuries. We'll move into wide receivers. No surprise here. Romeo Doubs, 40.7% rostered. Literally last man standing on that team, it seems like. Wicks got beat up this week, was on his way to a really good week. Watson still dealing with the thigh injury. Reed, it popped up and looked like he was going to go, then wasn't going to go. That whole thing's a mess. But this week, again, when there's only 2 players going, Dobbs is putting up numbers. He only had 5 targets, caught 4 of them for 79 yards and a touchdown for 17.9 fantasy points this week. Like, when they give him the ball and any opportunity, he is producing for him. And it seems like whenever somebody's back, he gets pushed back into the background. So it needs to be either only the second option. There needs to be 2 options, and he needs to be one of them because when he is, it's a big boost for that team. And it's like Love can't even see him for most of the week. But
he's like the most hated. Again, we mentioned it like a few weeks ago. He's wide receiver 35 on the year. And it's just like, everyone else that's around there is going to be rostered. And I don't know, people, it's an unimpressive wide receiver 35, playing every game and stuff like that. So he's only like 3 points ahead of Tank Dell, who's missed 4 games or something. But still, it's like he's had multiple good games. He's had maybe four of the games this year where they've been disappointing, 4 or 5 games, and the rest have been double-digit points. So, you could, especially if he's the only guy, you could definitely do a lot worse.
Yeah, and it's really frustrating because he's one of the players that I've really enjoyed watching. He seems like to be one of the best players on the team. I mean, him and Watson clearly have very different roles, and it seems like him and Love just cannot seem to get on the same page, or I don't know if he's flirting with his girlfriend or what's going on there, but like it's clearly providing a rift big enough that he's not willing to get over it because dude keeps putting up for him and looking really good when he does it. However, we go to the next guy, Rashid Shaheed, 10.5% rostered, widely available, seems to be finally healthy. He's come back. They switched him back into his role, which week 15 he was still kind of in it. 3 for 4, 36 yards, not super impressive versus the Giants. However, this week versus the Rams, 18.4 fantasy points, 5 of 9, 70 yards and a touchdown. I mean, that's really what you're expecting is that big play and a touchdown, and that really just saves his day. I mean, Carr is looking for him. We've heard it on the sideline more than once. Hey, go long and get open, and I'm going to throw it to you. And if that happens again, which very easily could because Carr likes him, he's definitely a good flex for you. You're swinging for the fences. I like him as a big play option for sure. Then the one that is widely available everywhere because nobody cares about any other Bronco. Brandon Johnson, 0.1% rostered. Cortland Sutton popped up in the concussion protocol, had a tough hit. And and Johnson kind of seemed to be the one who benefited. Not surprising. Judy still is just Jerry Judy. Him and Wilson don't seem to be on the same page. Can't do anything with it. And they get to play the Chargers, who secondary is not good. They've looked a little better, but it's so tough. And then, I mean, like I said, this past week, 3 of 5, 47 yards and a touchdown. That 15.7 fantasy points. That's what you're looking for. Like it's so good.
Yeah, definitely. Would you choose him over Jerry Judy?
Yeah. At this point, I'm terrified of him. I mean,
yeah.
The other guy I was looking at was oh my gosh. That's the reason I have injuries. I was looking at KJ Osborne, but when it comes to the two, I am so nervous on KJ. Like, because it doesn't matter who else is there. Whoever else is there is getting the ball before KJ, and I get it because he's terrifying. I mean, his week was really saved on 2 big plays that were back to back, and one of them was a touchdown. So,
yeah, I have him on the list just because we gotta acknowledge it's not just Addison. The Hawkinson's a huge one too. So if both those guys are out, this team throws the ball a lot, whether they should be or not. Like with Nick Mullins, they're going to throw the ball. Whoever's the quarterback, doesn't matter. So, he's on my list. 20.5 points. You got to pick him up. If you need a start, he's a decent one. Noah Brown's another one. Stroud, hopefully he's coming back. We don't know yet. It could be a bad concussion. Maybe they sit him out again. But if Stroud's back, I still like Noah Brown as a wide receiver 3. We've seen Stroud. He's on pace for 5,000 yards. So, and Noah Brown's the wide receiver 2 there at this point. And they play the Titans in week 17. So 7th most points to receivers given up. Demario Douglas, we continue to mention, like if you PPR, you just need maybe a safe floor. He could give you 10, 12 points. I don't expect much more than that, but sometimes there's value in that. If you, if you play in a 2-week championship and you have a lead of 30 points or something, you just need some safe floor plays. He's one of them. And then Demarcus Robinson, what are we thinking here? He's been the wide receiver 10 over the last 4 weeks. Averaging. I was going to ask about that one too.
I understand that it's touchdown dependent because he scored a touchdown in each of the last 4 games, but he hasn't finished below wide receiver 26. So he's been at worst a flex play over the last 4 weeks, and they're playing the Giants and then finish the year with San Francisco. But if you're just playing out this week and you're looking for a flex, I'd probably roll the dice again.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad. Like Matthew Stafford, it coincides with him finally throwing touchdowns. Right. Stafford has a bunch of touchdowns over the last 5 weeks, and I guess it replaced Tutu Atwell. And we've seen 3 receivers kind of be relevant at times. Like Atwell's had his games, even with Kupp and Puka there. So. I don't know.
Yeah, the touchdowns obviously inflate the numbers, but I do think it's very interesting that he's gotten 5 targets, 10, 3, and then 6. So he's consistently involved in the offense. Like the touchdowns are obviously helping the points, like I said, but overall he's still getting enough volume that even if he doesn't find the end zone, he should be a solid floor.
Yeah. So he's one of those under the radar, like. You go back and look at the last 4 weeks of the season, like what? He's wide receiver 10? That's pretty crazy. And no one's starting him. So
that's a good move there, Polo. I'd be picking up Robinson too. A lot of upside. And you talk about touchdowns for Robinson. You know who doesn't have a touchdown? Demario Douglas.
Yep.
And he's putting up double digits every week. I mean, that's something that's super underappreciated. He is Jacoby Myers 2.0. Dude is doing the same thing. It's just not able to get in the end zone. So really hoping for brighter days.
Just realistically going into next year, we have to project no passing touchdowns for the Patriots offense and just continue down that path because that seems to be the way they're going.
It's going to be Zeke and Stevenson, or I guess next year just be Stevenson more likely, but
yikes. Yeah, we'll see who the quarterback's going to be. They're the 4th pick right now, so. Yeah, they could get a a stud quarterback. There's a lot of them coming out. We'll see.
All right. Well, get out of wide receiver into the position that everybody's most curious about with Hawkinson going out. That is one of your best tight ends available. No surprise. Back to the well as a Chargers fan. Gerald Everett, 26% rostered. Man, he just loves putting up between 8 and 10 fantasy points. It's his bread and butter. With even Easton Stick at this point, 5 of 8 for 39 yards, 5 of 8 for 41 yards. This past week, 7 of 8 for 42 yards. He just likes to sit in that 40-yard range. Doesn't really score, even with par amount. They're just not looking to him for in the end zone. 8.9, 9.1, and 11.2 fantasy points. And it didn't really matter the competition. So if Allen's back, which I'm kind of doubting that they even need to do that, but if he is, it might hurt him a little bit, but it's just so hard to see him really get away from it. And Broncos are actually one of the best matchups for tight ends. When you're looking on the year, but it's terrifying. I understand you're really looking, like I said, that 8 fantasy point range, he's got you covered.
Yeah. I mean, you're hoping 4 catches for 50 yards and you're happy. And if they catch a touchdown, you're over the moon, right? So it's kind of what you're hoping there. And also Komet, and we don't know his situation, but he could be out too. So that's two starters at the tight end position gone. So potentially,
that's where I'm at. I've got Komet and Everett in a championship game, so I got to make that decision at some point.
Yeah, but I mean, Komet could be out with the knee injury. Chigakonkwo is who I put on here. He's been tight end 9 since week 12. Best game of the year. Came with a Henry passing touchdown, so a little fluky. That's obviously not going to happen all the time, but 18.3 points. Texans in week 17 give up the fourth most points to tight ends. So he's in that range. You hope for 4 for 50, and if you get a touchdown, you're super happy. So Okonkwo has been doing that for the most part, not the touchdown part, but giving you 3 to 4 catches and 40 to 50 yards more often than not the last 5 weeks. So there's that. And then, if you want to get into, I don't think, is it going to be Josh Oliver? I see Polo putting,
no, it'd probably Johnny Munt if I had to guess, if you're looking at the Vikings. And then if you're looking at the Bears, it's going to probably be Robert Tonyan.
Yeah. I would,
if you're going, if that's the route you're going. For example, saw this morning, one of my leagues has Waller available. So guess who I'm going to pick up, because that matchup is juicy.
Or likely still might be out there for whatever reason. Probably not, but obviously you guys know if those guys are out there, you're taking them. But I was thinking about the Vikings because I do think they're going to scheme up their tight ends no matter what. The problem is we just don't know which one exactly. So Kate Otten's also still out there. It's another guy. He hasn't been that involved lately, but he did have a run, but he's just kind of been uninvolved the last 4 weeks. I guess it's all been going to Godwin and Evans. So, tough.
Henry.
For sure.
He could be available now. Missed last week, so people probably dropped him because he's a tight end. But he's also tight end, I think 14 on the year, maybe.
Yeah. And he had 2 good games back to back with Zappy, and Mike Gesicki caught a touchdown, a tight end last week. So Zappy likes targeting his tight ends in the red zone. So for sure. I like Henry. Definitely.
So, all right. Those are the other options. If you're kind of looking around for tight end, they're a little easier to get a hold of because everybody only really wants to hold one unless you're me, and then I hold them all because I'm a cruel, cruel man. But get into defenses because, again, this is when it matters. And the one that I actually really enjoy this week are the Rams, 27.8% rostered. They face the Giants, who don't know who their quarterback's going to be. It's probably going to be Tyrod. They benched DeVito this past week, but Tyrod looked pretty capable of completely running that team like he has been as a vet. But week 14 versus Ravens, 0 fantasy points. Week 15 versus Commanders, 7 fantasy points. This past week versus the Saints, 4 fantasy points. And those were all pretty decent games. The Commanders was a little more one-sided, but Rams put a point. So if you're not able to put a point, they can get after you. So I'm not too worried about it. I think they're a pretty safe play.
Yeah, I have a feeling it might be DeVito. I mean, it's like, what's the point of putting Tyrod in there at this point? Like, you kind of want to lose as well if you're a Giants. They're never going to admit that, and they're always going to play to win. But you can kind of like, hey, DeVito, go out there, and you can kind of lose by still trying to win. So I have a feeling it still might be DeVito, but. Either way, I think that's a good matchup for sure. I put a few on here. The Bears get Atlanta week 17. The Bears have been pretty good for the last several weeks now. We've mentioned that. They kind of had a down week last week, but I like the Atlanta matchup. And then the Jags getting the Panthers is a really nice one that I would definitely be targeting. Maybe at the top of this list is them. And then I don't know what the Raiders percentages. I forgot to check, but they've been on fire lately. So they get the Colts in week 17, which I think is a pretty good one. They're the 4th highest scoring defense this year. So I don't know if they're going to probably a lot of people picked them up. Well, maybe not because they had the Chiefs, but either way, if they're out there, there's good matchups. The last couple of weeks have been weird for defenses though. Like, what we thought were going to be good matchups are just kind of okay. Like the Bills against the Chargers, I was all over that. I dropped the Cowboys for that, and then they gave an okay game. I think it was like 7 points or something, but I was expecting.
Raiders are 16% rostered on ESPN.
There you go. That's
pretty wide.
The number. Yeah, number 4 defense in the entire league. So in fantasy. So.
Yeah, and it's really been since their bye. They've just lit up 12, 21. Oh, whoops, wrong one. 12, 25, and 21.
Jeez, yeah.
Those are pretty big weeks.
And even before that, from week 8 on, I mean, they had a 0 in there in week 12, but 13, 19, 8, 8, and then the 12, 25, 21, so yeah. And I'm not afraid of the Colts necessarily. Like you can sack,
especially if they're without Pittman again.
Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, if you're running into that, it's definitely an option. It's nerve-wracking because Colts, if Pittman's back, is a different team. But still Minshew, he likes to turn the ball over. It still could be a good matchup for the Raiders either way. Who really, like we kind of touched on, they fired the coach and have really turned it on. So not just matchup based, just torching people.
Yeah. I don't know what the weather is. I know it's kind of hard to predict.
Fair weather. That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also the Bears who have really stepped it up recently.
The home game, right?
Yeah.
It's in Chicago, probably, I would assume, cold/snowing.
It looks like it's a Sunday game, right? So it looks like there's wind, 23 miles an hour as of now. Cold, of course.
But again, since week 12, the Bears have really turned. Since they got Montez Sweat, it's really turned around. 14 fantasy points. They had their bye. 14 fantasy points, 17 fantasy points. This past week was a little bit different because nobody saw that coming, but 3. And so it's Atlanta though. Like, are you really? I know last week was a surprise to everybody because who thought Falcons were going to decide that they wanted to win a game and use Bijan like they should, but it's super impressive. Bears have actually played very well, and this is a game that they should really be able to just.
What about under 50%, and then it'll probably be more because of the poor performance this week, but the Colts at home against the Raiders?
Yep. No, that's not bad.
It's a similar thing.
They like to really get to the quarterback, which helps them. But this week definitely hurt them. Like I said, it's again week 9. It seems like a lot of teams turned it around then, but
Yeah, it's all the
16.
out of division matchups for the Raiders have been double digit performances. The Chiefs defense had a 2 in week 12. The Chargers, of course, had that -4 in the blowout on the Thursday night. And then this past week, the Chiefs had a 9. But like the out of division opponents, 21, 15, 13, 20, 19, 15, 23, like big number performances. And the Colts defense has been fairly consistent outside of that anomaly last week against Atlanta. They've put up good numbers. So what was the stat too in that Raiders game that they had like no completed passes after the first quarter and still won?
Yeah, it's the first time since 2000.
Yeah.
Yep. 62 yards passing, but the Colts I think are kind of weak against the run, so I don't hate it though.
I mean, if you're streaming and it's available, I think that would be a good play.
Yeah, I wanted to look at how the Colts were getting all their fantasy points because I don't think they're a very good defense. So I never went back and looked, but I know a lot of sacks. They've been getting a lot of sacks for sure. But yeah, don't hate it. They're
definitely able to get after you. They have an okay secondary. It can be easily picked apart, but do you really try? We just saw O'Connell against Snead and McDuffie, like only threw 62 yards. Like, and they're able to run the ball, which is what they want to do anyway, and use their defense to win because the defense is getting pressure on the quarterback, and their secondary is good enough to cover most of the wide receivers.
And the Raiders, if you actually look at their point totals, kind of since O'Connell took over, 16 against the Jets, 13 against the Dolphins, 17 against the Chiefs, 0 against the Vikings, then they 63 against the Chargers, 20 against the Chiefs. So they haven't put up more than 20 points except for that explosion against the Chargers. They haven't done it in the last 6 games, once in the last 6 games. So, yeah, not a bad one. Not a bad defense.
All right. I guess with that, we're going to end our last wire for this year. Kind of insane that we've made it. We've done it.
I was talking about this with my brother. This has to be one of the best waiver wire years I could remember. You got guys like Puka, Kyron, McBride. I know I'm missing a Laporta, Achan potentially.
Dobbs for a couple weeks.
Yeah, there's been all the quarterbacks that have come in, but
I was going to throw out my guy Baker one more time.
Baker, yeah, but it's crazy to get Kyron's a top 5 running back or top 10 running back this year, top 5 in the average, like I said, all the receivers and the tight ends, and it's been a really good waiver year for sure. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's we've gotten some pretty good ones. Jerome Ford was another big one this year.
Yep.
He's really fizzled there here towards the end.
Tank Doe.
Yeah, that was another big one that we got a hold of. I'm trying to think if there's any other ones that we were
Packers guys here and there, like Reed,
that's
Flash.
been really...
Rasheed Rice. Rasheed Rice was another one. He's been top 24 receiver, even higher in the last 7 weeks or so. So it's been a really, really good year, and hopefully, I don't know. I switched over to Fab a couple of years ago, and that's definitely the way to go. It makes it a lot more fun with the strategy, and you can be the best team and get the best guy. So I like that.
Still like the idea of also getting points based on how many points you just scored, not just your win-loss, to help even the playing field a little more.
Yeah, I switched over to that as well. Like Sleeper, if you play on Sleeper, they do the median scoring, and that's definitely the way to go. Like this year especially, it was one of those years where I saw so many leagues where the top scoring teams were middle of the road. And it's just you got to go. I hate that you score the second most points and you lose to the guy who scored the most points and you get nothing for it, So
yeah,
definitely enjoy
because
that.
You clearly would have beat anybody else that week.
Yep. Yeah.
So adding that little bit and just something else to be looking forward to.
Yeah.
And if you're in keeper leagues right now, now's the time to go pick up the people on our like Tank Dell. Like at this point, go pick up anybody you can if you're available to, and get rid of players you're not keeping. For example, I dropped Trevor Lawrence again, just so I could add Darren Waller, which I'm greedy in that league because I have Andrews, Waller, and Laporta. So I'm clearly have an issue, but I also have 3 tight ends that I could potentially use as trade bait next year. So it's right now when you really start looking ahead and kind of getting an idea of what you can easily do with them. So getting ready. We're at that point. All right. I guess we'll get out of here. As always, thank you guys so much. If you haven't already, join the Discord. We have some fun stuff that we're hopefully going to try and do this offseason. And I'll probably be back with, if I had to guess, some basketball stuff later in the year when it gets closer to March Madness. But till then, as always, remember, keep up the nonsense.